Hi, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, then my name's Matthew, and today we're going to be looking at ukulele tuning. Now, as ukulele players, there are quite a few tunings to choose from. We know, of course, the most popular tunings, and there are a few variations even on those. There are even some that are really obscure, some that sort of harken back from some previous eras of the ukulele. So today we're going to break down not only what those different tunings are, and maybe even a couple of shapes and chords to play with those tunings, but perhaps some thoughts on what size ukulele might be more or less appropriate for each tuning. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. Before we get started with any of this, if you are going to experiment with different tunings, please make sure that you have the correct strings. Standard G, C, E, A strings will stretch upwards a little bit, normally by 2 or 3 frets. But then you go much beyond that and the string is so tense that it might snap. You can buy strings that are designed to be tuned at a higher sort of pitch, designed to withstand a greater level of tension within them. So if you are going to be playing in these higher tunings for much longer, I'd suggest investing in a new set of strings. Otherwise you're just going to keep breaking the same old ones. Conversely, if you're tuning down, well, you're not going to break a string, but if you tune down too far, then the string's just going to become really floppy, and it's going to be harder to keep the finger down because it's just going to want to flap about, and it also won't project as loud because that tension we were just talking about helps the string resonate, and if it's too floppy, there isn't any tension there in order for it to sing out. Now, I'm sure we all know the very familiar G, C, E, A with the high G string. For 99% of people, that's the first tuning that you come to. And it works on most of the sizes, most commonly the soprano, the concert, which is what this is, and the tenor. And so I probably don't need to talk too much about this tuning, other than the fact that it was originally taken from a Madeiran instrument, or a Portuguese instrument, called the rajau. The rajau was a 5-stringed instrument which was tuned D, G, C, E, A, and in fact it was this D. So if you were to go from top to bottom, you'd hear. And what a lot of those musicians did was they took off the D string and put it on a slightly smaller body, the body of an instrument called the machete, and that basically became the ukulele's standard tuning. Did you know that the tenor ukulele, which is what this is, was not originally tuned G, C, E, A, but was in fact tuned F, B flat, D, and G. So we can still play our normal ukulele shapes. There's a C chord, there's a G chord, there's an A minor chord. Except everything is a bit lower. This is because the bigger body of the instrument does tend to sort of respond better to lower pitches. I think it's a really nice sound. It's a really deep, dark sound, and for me personally, because I'm a sort of baritone vocalist, it really suits my vocal range. So I love singing in the key of B flat. Have you ever thought about playing jazz on the ukulele? Believe it or not, the ukulele is really well suited to playing jazz, and there's a whole host of stuff that you'll be able to do with your ukulele that you will never have done before and you'll never do elsewhere. So why not come and study some jazz ukulele on my brand new online course? The Jazz Beginners course takes you right from the basics, where you only need to know a handful of chords and strumming techniques. And by the end of the course, you'll be able to play dozens of jazz standards really well. We've got hours of videos split across 7 modules and over 40 lessons, most of which come with a downloadable PDF and activity pack. You'll learn how to play with others, as well as gain more independency as a musician. I've been playing jazz ukulele all of my life, and I'm constantly exploring and finding new things, and through these courses I'm going to be sharing some of that information with you. So why not head over to matthewquilliam.co.uk and begin your ukulele journey today.
Because you are all I long for, all I worship and adore.
Going a little bit further down, we have the baritone ukulele, which is even bigger than the tenor, and is tuned D, G, B, E. So again, we can still play our regular old shapes. Except this time, instead of this being a C chord, this is a G chord. That's a D chord, this is an E minor. DGBE is sometimes referred to as Chicago tuning because it's a tuning that originally takes its name from the guitar. Guitars are tuned E, A, D, G, B, E. So by taking the E and A strings off, you get guitar-like shapes, but just on 4 strings. And this tuning exists across multiple instruments. So tenor guitar, the tenor banjo, the baritone ukulele. So this tuning is quite a popular tuning that sort of transcends the boundaries of particular instruments, and so it's known by a name, Chicago tuning. You may have noticed as well that the tuning was not re-entrant, but was instead linear. What this means is the string closest to the ceiling is lower in pitch than its neighbour. Low, 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 high. So it goes from low to high. That's called linear tuning, which is what you find on a lot of instruments like the banjo, or the jazz banjo I should say, the mandolin, violin, cello, bass. The ukulele though often has a high string closest to the ceiling. If this baritone ukulele had a high string it would be, but it doesn't, it has the low string. People always say, why does a ukulele need that high string on the top, the physical top of the instrument? And I like to think about it in this way. It does have multiple uses, which we don't necessarily have time to go into in this video, but maybe I'll do another video on it another time. But in short, when you're strumming in one direction, you can hear the pitch rise from low to high, and then high to low. High, low, high, low. And so you do get this kind of sense that if you want a brighter, happier strum, strum down, and a darker strum, strum up. But with the ukulele having high strings at either end, you get a really nice, bright, happy sound. You don't really get that same kind of high, low, sort of back and forth movement. You just have this general whiff of joy and brightness. However, the linear tuning, which this tenor uke has, the low string, and it's also again in B flat. In fact, if I just put it in G, C, E, A, goats, canny, anything, that's what that would sound like. But yeah, as I was saying, these low strings do make the sort of layout of the fretboard a little bit more logistically easier to understand, because if you want to go high this way, you just go across the strings, and if you want to go high that way, you go that way. So you have a general trend. This corner is the lowest corner, and this corner is the highest corner. So you do have that kind of logical layout of the instrument with a low string like that. What about the other direction? This time we're going higher than G, C, E, A to A, D, F sharp, B. Back in the kind of 20s, 30s and even the 40s as well, ukulele players often played the banjolele. In terms of the shapes and the strings and everything, it's identical to a ukulele, but the body here is produced in the same way as a traditional big-size banjo, that is to say this ring with a skin stretched over it, a bit like a drum. And the reason they did that is because the soprano ukuleles, which were the main thing of the day, didn't really project very well, either on screen for the films or in a big theatre, which is where people consumed most of their entertainment. And so to get these things to be a little bit louder, they would tune them higher. Of course, the banjo is louder anyway, but using a higher tuning means the sound projects even further. And so you'll find a lot of banjolele players tuned to A, D, F sharp, B, especially those who are in the tradition of this sort of old-time jazz, even George Formby kind of style. So I'll just give you a little demonstration. Again, we've got a C chord there, but this time it's sounding as a D. And then here we've got a G chord sounding as an A, and so on and so forth. We can go even higher as well. This time I'm on a sopranino ukulele, and a thin line one at that as well, which makes it great for travelling. Slightly smaller than a soprano, you can sling it in a backpack and take it anywhere. But the small size of the body means that sometimes it's better to tune it higher, because then it can really help support those higher pitches. So this one's tuned in E flat, a semitone higher than the banjolele. This is B flat, E flat, G, C. Really loud, really punchy, and sounds very bright and sweet. The last tuning that relates to our normal shapes is this, the kind of micro nano ukulele sort of territory. This is even smaller than the previous uke I just showed, and these are tuned a whole octave above. So these are still G, C, E, A, but you can hear they're now that octave above, and you need special strings for these. As you can see, the frets are really small, but because of the small size of the body, focusing on the top end of the musical register makes this a really sort of plucky piccolo style instrument. These are kind of more of a novelty, I have to say, because I don't think you could really listen to much of it on its own, given how sort of high and shrill it is, but it does make a nice sort of top-end addition to a ukulele band, for example. I think if you had someone strumming away with this, just one in a group of otherwise normal sort of ukulele tunings, then I think it might just add a little bit of a descant, a little bit of a nice layer on top of the whole texture. Let's talk about a handful of other tunings. There are loads of tunings, like I sort of alluded to at the beginning, and I have to say I don't play all of them, and there's always something new to learn, but let's just consider a few here. And here we go with the first one of those. This is the bass ukulele. Now, to be honest with you, this is more of a bass than it is a ukulele. The word ukulele, part of the name bass ukulele, really just refers to the size. This is just a hair bigger than a baritone ukulele, but it's tuned the same as a double bass or a bass guitar in that it's E, A, D, G. So you don't strum these because they're such a low register. If you did try to strum it, it would just sound all really low and murky. So instead, these are great for playing bass lines. So if you want to add a little bit of low end to your ukulele group, this is fun. Or if you're a bass player already and you want something a bit smaller and acoustic that you can sort of carry around, it makes for a great practice tool. And because of the rubber strings, these are really good for sort of emulating a double bass sound without having to carry the enormous double bass around with you. Another banjolele now, but again it could be a traditional ukulele as well. This time we're tuned in fifths. This tuning is also known as jazz or standard tuning on a tenor banjo, but is popular right across many other instruments as well. This open fifths tuning is C, G, D, A. And its main sort of character is that it's very open and kind of bright. It's got a little bit of a wider range than a traditional ukulele, where the tuning is based around thirds and fourths. The fifth is much wider of an interval to tune between. So these chords do sort of sound a lot bigger and brighter. If you're looking to tune to these open fifths, and you're coming from a traditional GCEA ukulele tuning, the best way to approach it is to consider the fact that the A string is a normal ukulele A string. Then the next string over, being a D, is only 2 frets lower than an E string. So you can put your finger there, as you were going to play a C chord, and then you need 2 frets higher on that second string, so you'd put a finger on the 2nd fret there. And then you've got a G and a C string, but they are flipped the other way round. So that's all you need for a C chord. And there you are. The final thing I'd like to consider in today's video is the idea of coming up with your own tunings. And that's simply by taking a standard tuning like G, C, E, A, and just changing the string by a note or two and seeing what other chords we come up with. For example, if we tune this A string down, then we have an open C chord, whereby we don't have to put a finger down at all in order to create a C chord. And then if we want to play a G chord, all we have to do is finger 2/3 of a G chord. We just don't need to put anything down on the string closest to the ground. Or if you really wanted to, you could play a little diagonal stripe like that. 0, 2, 3, 4 to compensate for that top note that we miss. Another tuning I really like is this one, F, C, E, A. You only have to put one finger down on the first fret of the E string and you get a lovely F chord. These alternate tunings are known as scudatures, and this is often done just changing one string or one or two strings in relation to keeping the rest the same to achieve new effects. We're so used to hearing our normal chords in a set way, but actually if we try a new tuning and we hear it in a different context, a different setting, a different presentation, because the notes are in different orders, in different places, this can bring a new sense of freshness to a song, or help you achieve bigger stretches that you couldn't otherwise reach. If the strings are tuned closer together, that is to say the pitches are very similar in a smaller kind of range, then you don't have to stretch as far. But there is a risk that the notes sort of start to overlap, so you do have to be careful. Conversely, a wider tuning, like fifths tuning, the notes are more spread out, so the sound is bigger, but of course you then have bigger stretches on the instrument. So it's worth playing around with these sorts of things and seeing if you can come up with any sorts of songs and using the logic of just moving fingers by up and down a fret or two. I think you'd have fun with that, trying to sort of play around with things. So there we are, there's a little ramble about ukulele tunings. We've only scratched the surface really. If you'd like to learn more, I do recommend this book by Phil Dolman, Alternative Tunings for Ukulele. And this isn't even an exhaustive list of ukulele tunings, there are loads more, and of course any kind of alternate tunings or scudatures you come up with also count. So just have a play around really, and try and see if you can find some other tunings that float your boat, see if you can come up with anything that you like the sound of. Especially as ukulele players, we're gifted in that ukuleles are quite cheap and so we often have multiples of them, so why not use that to our advantage and try finding different sounds throughout our collection. I hope that's been interesting. If you've enjoyed this video then please do give us a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you over here for another video just like this one.